Adapting things for a new format always means some creative sacrifices, but we still haven't forgotten the ways these projects changed these characters.
To avoid potential confusion over Asha Greyjoy's name being so close to the wildling Osha, the show calls the Ironborn heroine Yara, and that's not all that's different about her in the small screen take. In the books, she's described as, quote, lean and long-legged, with black hair cut short, wind-chafed skin, strong sure hands, a dirk at her belt. Her nose was too big and too sharp for her thin face, but her smile made up for it. Instead of her smile being some selling point for Yara in Game of Thrones, however, it's her sheer badassery that wins over her mateys in the show.
Justice then will get revenge. Drink.
Seeing as Bran Stark is one of his family's most powerful children, you'd think the Game of Thrones showrunners would be attentive to every detail of his description when casting the kid.
I know he did. Heard the story 1,000 times.
But rather than the brown eyes and hair he sports on the show, Bran is described in the books as having the same auburn tresses and blue peepers that his mother's side, House Tully, bore. For as much money as the show has spent on stunning action sequences and sprawling set pieces, you'd think they'll be able to spring for some colored contacts and a bottle of hair dye. But, alas. Lady Brienne's no-nonsense personality comes through beautifully on screen, no doubt about it.
If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right.
But on the visual end of things, there's a major difference between what's read and what's seen on screen. In the books, she's described as being awkward and ugly and unable to attract a suitor, with broad and coarse features like prominent crooked teeth, freckles galore, swollen lips, and a battle-worn bulbous nose. Actress Gwendolyn Christie is simply too stunning to conceal. Considering Dario Naharis was compelling enough to catch the mother of Dragon's Eye for a while, it's no wonder the showrunners decided against playing it by the book when it came to his looks. In Martin's text, he's described as having a beard, cut into 3 prongs and dyed blue, the same color as his eyes, and curly hair that falls to his collar, and pointed mustachios that are painted gold. That might have made him an excellent entrant into a modern facial hair contest, but it might not have blended well with the crowd in Meereen.
I hope it brings you happiness.
It might seem nitpicky to point out the few features that were lost in translation bringing Daenerys Targaryen to the screen, considering all the fan favor Emilia Clarke's portrayal has earned. But no one is perfect. For starters, Dany is described as much younger in the books, but considering how icky her forced marriage to Khal Drogo already was, it's a mercy to make her a bit older on screen. What didn't have to change in the screen version was the violet shade of her eyes and the visible hair loss that happened after she survived a night in the funeral pyre.
We obviously didn't communicate clearly.
The show's depiction of Crow's Eye might be as off-putting as it needs to be, but it's unfortunate that the show ignored so much of what makes Euron intimidating. On screen, Uncle Euron resembles Yara and Theon strongly, but he should be a much scarier figure with a near otherworldly appearance.
I am the storm, brother.
According to the written form, Euron's hair and beard should be dark as a raven's feathers, and he should bear a black leather patch over his left eye and sport bruised blue lips to indicate his addiction to that narcotic beverage he likes so well, Shade of Evening. HBO's makeup department had their hands full with creating the web of burn scars that cover so much of the Hound's face, but they still didn't go far enough to match the book's description of his gnarled mug. For starters, his scars are on the wrong side of his face, and he's supposed to be missing an ear there too. Also, he should be much skinnier, and his series of scars should have included a black mass of leathery flesh that never quite recovered from the cruelest chapter of his lifelong sibling rivalry story.
Come on, you can do better.
Ser Jorah isn't half bad to look at on Game of Thrones. However, our favorite friend-zoned knight wouldn't be quite so dapper if the show stuck to the book. In the text, he's said to be the opposite of handsome, with a neck and shoulders like a bull, and coarse black hair that covers his arms and chest so thickly that there's none left for his head. Additionally, he would have been a bit bulkier and branded with a demon's mask tattoo on his cheek, earned while being disobedient during temporary enslavement.
All I've ever wanted was to serve you.
There's no doubt about it that Ramsay Bolton gave all new meaning to the word bastard on Game of Thrones. So there's nothing really to gripe about when it comes to Ewan Rayon's portrayal of the more sadistic Mr. Snow.
He's good. Very good.
But for as well as Rayon captured Ramsay's terrible soul on screen, he was still way too good looking for the part. As it was written, Ramsay was an ugly man with big bones, sloped shoulders, and ghostly grey eyes. He should have also had a mangier mop up top, a broader nose, and more pinched lips than he did.
You win.
The Lord of the Dreadfort was cunning, cruel, and as cold as the winter winds whipping through Westeros, so the calculating nature of Roose Bolton wasn't lost on screen. However, he also doesn't look anything like the character of the books.
I imagine you're familiar with the procedure?
For starters, Bolton should have long black hair, pale eyes the color of mist, and a strangely unlined face, despite his age. His lips were also so thin that when he pressed them together they seemed to vanish altogether like the ruthless plotter he was. On the show, Theon went through hell as the prisoner of Ramsay Bolton, but emerged from his ordeal mostly unscathed on the surface. Well, except for the loss of his dignity and dangly bits. But in the books, the bastard of the Dreadfort treated Reek much more harshly, aging the youngest Greyjoy by 40 years and leaving Theon short several fingers, toes, and teeth by the time he escapes. To be true to the source material, Theon should have come away from the torturous experience with whiter hair and much less meat on his bones. There's no doubt that Tyrion's spirit, smarts, and resilience comes through from page to screen in Game of Thrones, but he's definitely more attractive than the imp of the books. He should have a squashed-in face, and following the Battle of the Blackwater, only about half of his nose. His pale blonde and black hair is a startling combination, as are his different colored eyes.
Surely there's some good news lurking somewhere.
Well, there is. Despite these differences, Tyrion is still a total fan favorite. As played by Charles Dance, Tywin Lannister cuts a very imposing figure on the show, and arrives as a near-perfect replica of the tactical and tyrannical family patriarch.
Because we have been told as much by the many experts who serve the realm by counseling the king on matters about which he knows nothing.
Even so, his hair and beard were a bit off. He should have had stiff blonde whiskers that covered his cheeks, framing a stern face, a bold head, a hard mouth. For the most part, Robb Stark of the novels came through to the screen just fine. As he was written, the King in the North was an honorable tactician and had a bright future ahead of him, and if he had only made good on his oath to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, he just might have made it to the Iron Throne instead of facing the bloody fallout of the Red Wedding.
It's more complicated than that, you know it is!
But there were a few facial differences to be found in the portrayal. In the novels, he, like some of his siblings, has the Tully's red hair, and bore a clean-shaven face. The portrayal of Jaime Lannister as the one-handed Kingslayer, whose only true romantic relationship is with his own sister, is as icky and complicated as it should be.
Things I do for love.
But there's one thing about his on-screen appearance that drives Martin's book readers mad: his hair. During the first 2 seasons, Jaime should have had long curly blonde hair and a clean shave, but by season 6 he was supposed to look pretty unkempt, rather than boasting the same military-ready grooming style he's always had. Lancel's appearance in early seasons was accurate for the most part, but much of what happens to him after joining the Sparrows on the show is made up.
Cousin Lancel, I hardly recognized you.
My deepest sympathies.
Book Lancel takes severe wounds at the Battle of the Blackwater, which age him prematurely, and while he still later gives up his lordship and new wife to join the Faith Militant, there's no face-carving action involved in the initiation ritual. While Barristan Selmy starts out looking about right, the show decided to skip out on his shaggy days from the story. When Barristan Selmy travels to Essos in order to join Daenerys' retinue, he's grown his hair and beard long and goes by an alias, Arstan Whitebeard. And his eyes should be bright blue rather than hazel too. Although Barristan eventually trims his hair and beard after revealing his true identity to Daenerys, the show completely omitted this evolution in Barristan's appearance.
I failed him.
The show's version of the Middle Baratheon brother maintains Stannis' stern, uncompromising demeanor, but he just doesn't look much like the Stannis of the books. Perhaps the biggest issue is that Stephen Delane looks significantly older than Robert Baratheon actor Mark Addy. He should have also had the Baratheon brown locks, with a bit of boldness on top, along with dark blue eyes and far less wrinkles.
Let no man claim ignorance as an excuse.
The choice of Carice Van Houten for the role of Melisandre was a triumph by the casting staff.
I take no credit.
As described in the book, she has a heart-shaped face, long coppery hair, and red gowns that move like flames as she walks. The only thing that could be adjusted to match the books is changing her eye shade to amber red instead of her natural blue. The King's Hand, Eddard Stark, was well liked by anyone not named Lannister in Game of Thrones' first season, and he was a pretty close match to what was described in the book's account of the late House Stark patriarch.
What book?
As described by Martin, he had a soft voice and looked much older than 35, with a trimmed beard and winter-weary expression. However, to be perfectly on the nose with the original vision, he should have had longer, darker hair and a salt-sprinkled beard. While King Robert was as brutish, bearded, and round as he was expected to be, there were still a few things that stood out to some fans as departures from the text descriptions of the usurper. Unlike the medium brown do Robert sported on screen, he's supposed to have a much darker shade of mane. Additionally, Robert Baratheon would tower over most men, putting him near the height of Hodor, while actor Mark Addy stands only 5 feet 11 inches tall.
They don't put that part in the songs.
Even though Edmure is the baby of the Tully family, he hardly resembles his sisters Catelyn and Lysa on the show. He also looks just as old as they do, when he actually should be in his late 20s or early 30s at the start of the novels. A touch of auburn should have been added to his tresses, along with a fiery beard to make the character a little more distinguishable as a Tully brother.
That's a fine thing.
He's gigantic, strong, and terrifying, but the mountain that rides has not been very accurately depicted on the show. 3 different actors played the mountain in the show, and the one who comes closest to the mark is Hathor Bjornsson. In the books, Gregor Clegane is described as being nearly 8 feet tall and 400 pounds of pure muscle. Bjornsson certainly has the bodybuilding physique as described, but he still needs a beefier build to match his literary counterpart, including arms as thick as tree trunks. The mountain also is supposed to have hair long enough to fall into his eyes, which doesn't seem to hinder his battle skills in any way.
Who am I fighting?
Does it matter?
Among readers, as well as show-only fans, dancing master Syrio Forel is a favorite secondary character. But while fans of both mediums can agree on Syrio's awesomeness, book readers will be quick to point out that there's one problem with Miltos Yaramalo in the role: his full head of bushy, black hair. In the books, the character was completely bald, and although a criticism of that attribute might run counter to his philosophy,
it is heavy as it needs to be.
It'd still look different if the character's image was canonical. Although we can already predict what Ygritte would have to say about any criticism of her screen depiction,
you know nothing.
There were still differences in the adaptation, including the fact that Rose Leslie is much more beautiful than readers might have expected for the role. As described in Martin's writings, Ygritte had tangled hair and a round peasant face, a pug nose, slightly crooked teeth, and eyes that were too far apart. It's hard to imagine anyone else claiming the Iron Throne the way Lena Headey did as Cersei Lannister. But there were some significant changes between the book version and what's seen on the show. In the novels, as she begins to drink constantly, she gains weight to the point she can no longer fit in her old gowns. She also had bright emerald eyes and a more striking shade of blonde in her hair. Of course, the most important thing is that she's just as ruthless as anyone.
I choose violence.
Actor John Bradley has Sam's sweet sidekick demeanor down pat, but he doesn't bear a perfect physical resemblance to the Samwell of the novels.
I suppose that life is irregular.
The book version of Sam is clean-shaven, has light-colored eyes, and weighs a good bit more than Bradley does. There's very little wrong with Aidan Gillen throughout his arc as a slippery Peter Baelish, but there's one feature of the book's version that's been noticeably absent from his appearance: his signature pointy beard. At this point, we're literally splitting hairs here, but it's still a difference, so it counts.
Every ambitious move is a gamble.
Pedro Pascal was an inspired choice to play Oberyn Martell. That said, his appearance on the show wasn't 100% accurate to how he's described in the books. While he has the same swarthy olive complexion and black eyes, he lacks the longer hair and widow's peak the Red Viper of Dawn should have. Guess wigs weren't in the budget either.
How did that come to pass?
As amazing as Natalie Emanuel is, the show really blundered here by aging Missandei up so drastically, just to give viewers a new romance storyline between her and Grey Worm. Additionally, the physical description of Missandei, her home island of Nath, and their pacifist religion really seems to point to a Southeast Asian influence. She should also have gold eyes and a flatter face, but again, it's the aging up factor that doesn't sit well with this sidekick. Kit Harington is Jon Snow, and no one else comes to mind to match the role better.
All my life, I wanted to be Jon Stark.
Even his curly tresses technically comport with the story. Contrary to popular belief, because a close inspection of George R.R. Martin's book reveals the texture and length of his hair is never explicitly spelled out. The differences that do remain, however, he should have dark grey eyes, rather than brown, and he should appear a little younger and with lighter locks. Maisie Williams is as close to perfect for the part of Aya as you can get, with the correct color hair, eyes, and solemn face. However, in the spirit of pointing out even the smallest differences,
nothing is just nothing.
It's worth noting that HBO made the decision to age up all the Stark children by a few years for the television series. So, she should really be 9 years old in Season 1, not 12. Also, while it's debatable if Book Aya was ever really a horse face, it's probably that her face should be lengthened just a bit to justify the cruel nickname of her youth. Many book readers were extremely surprised when we got our first glance of Lysa Arryn at the Eyrie, and not just because she had a full-grown boy still nursing from her. In the novels, Lysa is puffy and overweight from a succession of failed pregnancies and miscarriages. Kate Dickie nails the strident, jealous, and paranoid behavior of Lysa, but there's no way anyone would ever call her overweight. Meanwhile, her eye color should be light blue, rather than green. While actress Hannah Murray portrays the innocence of Craster's daughter quite well, the 27-year-old actress will never look like the fresh-faced teen Sam Sgowpow should be. Also, Murray has prominent upper front teeth, and for many book fans, her toothy appearance during the first seasons was slightly distracting, because such a unique facial feature was never mentioned in the novels.
Don't let them send me away, Sam.
For book readers, the true identity of the mysterious Cold Hands has been a topic of hot debate for many years. Those who felt Cold Hands as Benjen may have gotten some validation when the characters were merged for the show. But just because something happens in the series doesn't mean that's how Martin himself will do it.
Great war is coming.
But Uncle Benjen was described as having sharp features and being gaunt as a mountain crag, with a hint of laughter in his blue-grey eyes. If he was to become Cold Hands in the Winds of Winter, as in the show, he'd boast some other features like blackened eyes and, well, cold hands. While the Resident Evil movies are definitely a departure from the games that inspired them, we still get to see some of our favorite characters on the big screen. One of the most iconic characters in the Resident Evil series. Many fans know Chris Redfield for destroying doors, smashing the heads of bioorganic weapons, and some of the worst acting in video game history.
You did a really good job. This case was just too weird.
His enormous, bulging muscles were his true weapons, but he still whipped out a firearm to get some real work done. Despite his importance to the games, he doesn't appear on the big screen until the 4th film in the series, where he's played by Wentworth Miller. Obviously, Miller isn't quite as jacked as his digital counterpart, but he's just as tough. His screen outfits are far from what Chris Redfield wore in the video games. Instead of short sleeves with BSAA patches on them, he wears some kind of tactical field jacket. He's got plenty of gear strapped onto his torso, but his all-grey ensemble just makes him look like a bootleg Ghostbuster. Ali Larter breathes life into Claire Redfield, sister to Chris and heroine to Resident Evil fans everywhere. On the big screen, Claire doesn't keep her signature ponytail, but she does retain her vest. We're not sure where you can pick up vests that feature little pockets for combat knives, but it's probably safe to assume it's not actually a thing in real life. And if it is, don't lie, you'll probably use it for hot dogs anyhow. Also absent are the gloves and Claire's black short-sleeved turtleneck, all making the big screen Claire more badass than the original. And given that a ponytail is basically just a handlebar designed to be grabbed by undead monsters, maybe letting her hair down was a good tactical decision. Tube top? Check. Short brunette hair in a bob cut? Check. Miniskirt? Check. Sienna Guillory's Jill Valentine seems to be the most accurate portrayal of a Resident Evil character possible. Sure, this was only her dressed-down look for Resident Evil 3, and post-apocalyptic heroes fighting through hordes of biting enemies should probably put on a coat or something, but let's all appreciate the risks she takes to look good. In Resident Evil Retribution, Jill returns as a blonde villainess, which is a pitch-perfect version of her evil form in Resident Evil 5, complete with the device on her chest and her one-piece outfit. As far as bad guys go, Albert Wesker is one of the most arrogant.
7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
If his glowing red eyes weren't a dead giveaway that he's evil, then maybe his frosted tips are. In Resident Evil Afterlife, we see him played by actor Sean Roberts. He's got the sunglasses, and those tips definitely seem frosted, but something about him still feels a little off. Perhaps it's because Sean Roberts was only in his mid-20s when he filmed the role, and Wesker is supposed to be much older, like he was in Resident Evil Extinction, when he was played by Jason O'Mara. Other than that, everything was pretty spot on. Black leather and bad guys just go together. Not as brawny as Chris, Leon Kennedy is still one of the coolest characters in Resident Evil, but there are some stark differences between his appearance in Resident Evil 4 and actor Johan Erb's version in Resident Evil Retribution. Basically, it was just too difficult to find someone with Leon's hair, which director Paul W.S. Anderson confirmed in an interview with Collider. We see the acrobatic Ada Wong portrayed by actress Bingbing Lee in Resident Evil Retribution, wearing her signature red outfit, which is a fairly faithful representation of the video game character, from the hairstyle down to the yellow butterflies on her dress. The accuracy of the portrayal is so impressive that it looks like Ada stepped out of the game's code and into the movie. She even performs that incredible disarm using a front handspring kick in the movie. This one's just perfect. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was Carlos Oliveira's first video game appearance, helping Jill Valentine escape the zombie-infested Raccoon City. In the films, he's portrayed by Oded Fehr, who you might remember as Ardeth Bay from The Mummy. For some reason, Fehr just can't escape the undead. As you might be able to tell, there's a big difference between the small screen and big screen characters. Carlos is supposed to be youthful, with medium-length hair, whereas Fehr is more mature with a shorter haircut, and more of a desert soldier look. It's not an unpleasant departure from the original character's look, but it's a surprising change when compared to the accuracy of the other characters. Whenever we think of sandwiches, we think of the majestically bearded Barry Burton.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
In Resident Evil Retribution, the beard is brought to life by Kevin Durand, who wears a red vest and assortment of straps and holsters similar to that of the original character design. The biggest difference is that Kevin Durand's face is just too friendly. The video game character looks a lot more hardened in later iterations of the series. But hey, much respect for the attention to detail on the outfits. It's almost enough to make you forgive how nobody spoke of sandwiches. Almost.